Hey everyone, you're listening to the Rosenfeld Review, where we're just a bunch of blind guys trying to figure out the elephant. I'm your host, UX guy Lou Rosenfeld from Rosenfeld Media, and I have, at this point, 3 people joining me today. There might be a fourth, we'll see. I have Jose Coronado, Rachel Posman, Guneet Singh, and hopefully I'll be joined by Crystal Yan. They are an amazing panel that's going to be discussing the bigger picture of DesignOps and ResearchOps at this year's DesignOps Summit taking place in New York, October 23rd to 25th. And I usually hate panels, but every once in a while I get an opportunity to kind of sit with greatness. And all right, I'm laying it on a little thick here, but this is a really great group. So you know whom we'll be talking to today. Rachel Posman is someone who's leading design operations at UberEats. Jose Coronado, great to have him join. I've known him for years. He's a design operations leader at JPMorgan Chase. Guneet Singh is managing customer experience and research operations at Docusign. And we will be joined certainly at the panel in October, if not sooner, by Crystal Yan, a product leader at Remitly. And so we have an interesting mix of research operations and design operations leaders to tackle some big topics. I've asked them, it's kind of not fair, but I've asked them to talk about our 3 themes that we're covering at this year's conference, which come straight out of our user research. And those 3 themes are, number 1, proving value and measuring outcomes. Number 2, partnering outside design. And theme number 3, change management. So these are really trivial, easy ones to tackle. Before we jump right in, I feel bad. I've been doing a lot of talking. So if you don't mind, the 3 of you, give me a big hello on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
Hello.
Boy, I hope their timing is better when we're there in person. All right. Well, why don't we jump in then? Let's start with the first theme about proving value and measuring outcomes. And Rachel, I wanted to start with you. You actually have a pretty good starting point around assessing maturity and coming up with quick wins. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you're doing at UberEats and how that you've put those principles into action a bit?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that the design ops role and design program management role is probably more known and established than when I started, but I've kind of always been one of the first design program managers or somebody doing this role in all the teams that I've joined. So oftentimes there's a phase of like kind of proving your value or showing like what this role is. Even at UberEats, where there's a kind of established and large design program team across Uber, I was the first one doing this kind of work on UberEats. So some of the things that I do when I first start is I actually kind of use the the design process to figure out what to do, where to start when there's a lot of work to be done. And oftentimes there's a bit of like assessing the maturity of the design team. So understanding like what kind of systems and tools and stuff do they have in place, or oftentimes they're really more focused on the craft if they don't have this kind of role in place, rather than like being consistent around like how they work. So whenever I start, I start with like really kind of the problem definition or the discovery phase, similar to the design process, and just understanding like who and what I'm working with, just taking stock really. And then it's about just like synthesizing all of the needs across the team. And I really like to communicate what those are to a broad audience, so we're like aligned on what those needs are and start to prioritize them. And then something I've been finding really valuable and helpful, especially on design teams like this, where I'm the first one doing this role, is to start with the foundational design focused things first. There's always going to be those like big, meaty, cross-functional problems to solve with product and engine, all these other partners. But I think by focusing first on design and really get them like the solid foundation and kind of like let them know that you're there for them. And those are like the first things that I really like to start with on a team that hasn't had this kind of role before. So that's creating like processes and stuff for them. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because you're doing it at UberEats, which is a new organization, and the sort of milieu in which you're doing that is very different than, let's say, where you're doing it, Jose, at JPMorgan Chase, which is 150 years old or thereabouts, and where this type of operations is probably pretty new. What are you finding is a good way to start proving value and measuring outcomes there?
It's striking similarities to what Rachel just mentioned, but basically, my first the questions that I got posed by the designers when I first joined were, what are you going to start solving or solutioning? And my answer back to them is like, I don't know. I have to do research. I have to really understand what is going on. What are the bigger needs that our team has? What are the bigger pain points? And then turn those into an assessment of basically where we are as a practice. And I was fortunate enough to get the full support from our design leadership team to create the space to do that, precisely that, do the research and diagnostic of the practice. And as Rachel mentioned, there's plenty of things with the partners that we need to address. But the immediate need is for the designers to see that there's things that are happening that are helping them change or improve the way they work, and that they're being supported. So, for example, one of the first things, I was talking to Josh Silverman in Helsinki, and he asked me, what was the first thing you did? And I said, well, the onboarding guide for new joiners. He goes like, that's a perfect place to start, because we need to make sure that the people that join the team know what they need to do. And even though for those that were already inside, that was not an immediate perceived win, but because we're always growing the team, we need to have the processes in place and the support to create that culture that we're looking for. And then, go ahead.
Yeah, and I remember in prior conversation, you've also talked about the value of design systems at that point as a sort of Trojan horse of sorts to get a foot in the door.
Yeah, and the design system that we have right now is about a year and a half old, which basically preceded me by an entire year. But I think the design system is a clearly visible area of value in terms of the value of the design team and the value of scaling design in the organization without having to get so many designers in the entire business. And basically what we have done there, and the person who's leading the design system has done this 3 or 4 other times in previous organizations. So have taken a collaborative approach, trying to be as open with contributions as possible, with the limitations that we are such a complex organization. So we don't have the freedom to be a true open source collaboration design system. We have to be substantially managed and control that, but adding value to the organization as we add components.
So, Guneet, I think you're taking maybe a slightly different approach at Docusign that's more focused on actual metrics of ROI. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So having done research, and also, we have design operations as well in the company. One of the key things which, we realized as we were maturing on the research maturity model, that, we need to have the research operations. And one of the big things which every single leader had asked us, like, what's the value proposition research ops going to provide, or what is the impact they're going to deliver? So that kind of immediately brought us to a point like, hey, research ops going to help improve the business productivity, but how are we going to measure it? So that's kind of, gave me a little thought for who, like, let's kind of understand, what ROI means. Because when I'm looking at the executive leaders asking for impact, they're defining ROI more from a financial standpoint. But when I'm looking at the product leaders, they're asking for, okay, how I'm going to have an impact on a feature or a product which I'm going to build as a result of the research operations. So having defined, what ROI means for who's the audience is a key thing, which we discovered as we were kind of, embarking on a research operations journey per se. Specifically, if I look at looking at the qual and the quant side of ROI, I think it's not necessarily return on investment. It's more about understanding the impact that research is bringing, whether it's influential impact. Research never gonna be able to have a top line direct one-to-one dollar impact. That's something which I have to educate and also have to prove it through the impact, showing that doing a research helps us understand the impact on the adoption, understand the mental models of the customer. So that's something which we define.
Excellent. So we've just been joined by Crystal. Hi, Crystal.
Hi.
Glad to have you join. I'm going to throw this over to you. We're just talking about that first theme of proving value and measuring outcomes. And I know from your perspective, much is focused on the qualitative side, whereas Guneet's talking about maybe more quantitative definitions. You're looking at something a little different. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you look for in terms of evaluating quality at Remitly?
Sure. So I think that one of the ways in which we try to make the case for research operations is one of our the most important company value that everyone is brought into the company with is a focus on customer centricity. And the company that I work with has really put sort of financial support behind this value, which I think not necessarily all companies tend to do. So for example, every employee gets $1,000 to travel to one of the countries that Remitly sends money to. And then when you're there, employees are encouraged to either pick up cash and take photos of their experience, or interview people who are also receiving money and learning more about sort of who's the one sending them money and what sort of delivery methods do they prefer. And I think having a policy like this really is part of the research operations practice, in the sense that it's really trying to get everyone involved in doing the research. And maybe not everyone identifies as a researcher, and sometimes people are afraid that they're doing something not perfectly. But I think that overall, the leadership team that I partner with really does prefer that every employee feels empowered to get closer to the customer and talk to our customers. And that matters a little bit more than making sure people are doing research perfectly. And so I think just always being able to speak to the values that I know our leadership team has been a way that I've tried to advocate for building out our research operations practice.
I mean, it sounds like a really enlightened leadership team if you're not having to necessarily justify research, rather than you're actually, kind of putting their values out there in a new way. And I just love the idea of giving money to employees to travel. I want to work there. But for now, we're going to move on to the next theme, which is partnering outside design. Now, Rachel and Jose and Crystal, you've all talked about a form of co-creation or co-development as a good method for kind of connecting with people outside maybe the design organization itself. Jose, do you want to go first on that? Talk a little bit about whom you're partnering with and what you found to be successful.
Yeah, sure. So basically, the diagnostic that we did with regards to our processes and our collaboration came about at the same time as a technology leader was doing a similar assessment just on the technology processes. So we got introduced by the people that we independently talked to, and basically we encountered that there was a lot of common ground between the technology process improvements that he was trying to drive, as well as those that we were trying to evolve from a design operations perspective. And basically what we did was partner together to insert design into the technology processes that he was trying to improve, and insert technology practices into the overall design process that we were trying to work on. And that way we were able to basically leverage each other's work rather than work in parallel or work in a silo, and ended up with a better outcome altogether.
Crystal, I know that you've had some similar success, especially moving quickly to participatory design at Remitly. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I historically have tried to bring different partners outside of research and design into the research process and the design process through having, like an hour-long workshop, and I'm introducing different skills to different team members. And I think in actually many contexts, especially when trying to drive change in a much larger organization, there's a lot of value in that. But in trying to get partners within a specific cross-functional team to embrace doing the research, I found it's been really helpful to split up the kinds of activities I would encourage people to do in a workshop and do mini workshops over time. So for example, there's a cross-functional team that I lead, and I really wanted to make sure that everyone on the team, from the engineers to the compliance program manager, really felt comfortable understanding who our customers were and making decisions when a decision had to be made quickly, and it was a decision that they were had the agency to make, that they felt empowered to make the right decision on behalf of what our users needed. And so I split up some of the activities I would typically put into a single workshop into a couple of mini exercises that were part of a sprint planning day, and alongside other activities and these were gatherings where the whole team was together, so everyone was sort of on the same page and learning the same content. And so like the first activity would be maybe I had a couple of quotes from an interview that I had conducted, and I asked people to just kind of think about what would be a follow-up question they would ask to someone who said this, and then to write those down and then practice asking those questions to each other, and then going around and critiquing how the question could be made even better. And so that was one 15-minute activity 1 week. And then 2 weeks later, we did another activity where during that period of time, everyone was shadowing an interview that I was conducting. And the one thing I asked them to do is that they had to ask at least one question by the end of the interview. And then so the second activity was everyone getting together and sharing something that they learned from the process of practicing that interview, and then also something they learned from that customer. And then a third activity that I did was then just turning it on to someone else entirely, and they were the one driving the interview. And so that time, the next time when we debriefed, they could talk about their experience trying to navigate all the different hats that they were trying to wear when they were interviewing. They could reflect on a moment where they realized as they were asking a question, a way that they wanted to ask it differently next time. And then the last activity that I have planned, which actually hasn't happened yet, is a chance for us to all get together and synthesize some of the learnings from those interviews together, and just make sure everyone's a part of the process of trying to figure out what's the most insightful thing that we learned from this, and ask each other, and it might be a backend engineer or it might be someone from our legal team who was actually a part of conducting that interview. Do you remember what stood out to you when someone said this? And just making sure that everyone is part of that process. I found that in previous organizations that I've led, when someone feels like, a persona just comes out of the blue, it's really hard for them to embrace it. But when they're a part of the process of creating that, and they're part of the process of creating the research as well that drives that, by the time a certain deliverable comes out and it's guiding the strategy for what you're going to build, everyone's already bought in because they were part of the process of talking to customers.
Well, I mean, there's some really great things to unpack there. One is that you gave them tools and a language so that they could ultimately, over time, take over the conversation and make it their own. That's fantastic. The other thing that really strikes me about your approach is it's iterative, and it's done over time. And that makes me think a bit of what Guneet, I believe, is doing over Docusign with looking at the cadence of how this takes place over time. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, Guneet?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say +1 on what I was hearing from Crystal. What we do as, exactly co-creation is definitely one of the big themes. Also what we do is we try and establish the cadence at a certain checkpoints in the journey itself, because the research and the research operations is under the product itself. So by default, it's kind of, co-located and co-created, with the design and also with the engineers itself, as we kind of embark on any journey per se. As far as the cadence is concerned, what I've done is, established few checkpoints in the year where we're not reacting to the tactical project needs or a product research needs. We have established a framework, like we're going to do a planning cycle at every start of fiscal year, where one of the lead has been identified. They start by writing a plan for the year, and everybody pitches in to critique and also to provide input. So that's the cadence which gives them empowerment to influence what will be built or what will be researched or what will be designed in the year itself. So that kind of brings all the different parties across, from not only from product, also design, engineering, and also marketing, from across the organization. And that is more iterative in the nature, because we start at the onset of the fiscal year, but then we have like quarterly check-ins on how we're doing with respect to that particular plan. And that becomes more of a living document per se, which kind of, everybody goes to and refer back to it.
Rachel, I think you have some things to add to this.
Yeah, I think I echo what everyone's saying. I think the thing I want to add is that I think program management and design operations can really be that bridge between design and all these other partners. And of course, it's important for these partners to understand like the way design works and the scrappy nature, and like how we want to work fast, and how the designers like to work. But I think the opposite is true too, that design really benefits from learning how these other teams work, and how to bring business into their design process, and flexing the muscle of like why design is important. Before I worked at UberEats, I was at Capital One, which is this highly regulated, risk-averse industry with very like big bureaucratic processes. So coming from Adaptive Path, all of our designers, we were acquired by Capital One. So all of our designers were kind of used to this like fast, quick, like we're design, we just want to do what we do kind of way of working, to then having to like check all of these boxes that like legal and risk and compliance and marketing and all these teams required. So it was my job, and I think I really saw myself as this roadblock remover, or kind of this person to help navigate these complex processes. So I would help them understand like how and why we need to kind of partner on these things.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want more, not only do we have a whole bunch of podcasts in our archive, but we have something that's very current, very alive, and very engaging for groups, and that is our communities. Rosenfeld Media runs a variety of communities that meet on a monthly basis for video conferences on a variety of topics near and dear to UX people, ranging from enterprise experience to advancing research to design and research operations. I want to encourage you to join one of our communities. Again, it is free by going to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. Not only will you get a monthly video conference that you can listen in on and participate in, ask questions and so forth, we'll give you access to the recordings. And for some of those communities, we're talking about dozens of recordings with really interesting presenters and facilitators. You'll also get a newsletter. You'll get access to an advice columnist. Yes, we actually are providing advice columnists for each community. And finally, if you're interested in our conferences, our communities correspond to our conferences. So you will be the first to know when programs go live, when tickets go on sale, and by the way, most of our conferences sell out, and other good things about our conferences, such as when the scholarship applications open up. So go to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. You're going to find something that's free, something that's interesting, and it's a great opportunity to find your tribe as well. We'll see you there. You know, Rachel, I this is an aside. I forgot that you were at Cap One and Adaptive Path, and I thought I might go a whole day without running into someone who's worked there, but it won't be this day. I want to move on to our last of the three themes. We'll just spend a few minutes on this, and that's not really fair because it's like the biggest one. It's change management, and as actionable as a lot of the advice you all gave us on theme 2 was, I think this one's going to be kind of a challenge. Some people suggest that change management is really aspirational at best. I wonder if you all would agree or not with that. And I'm going to start with you, Rachel, because you bring a heavy acronym to the table when it comes to this topic. I believe it's ADKAR. Just rolls off the tongue. What's ADKAR?
Yes. Yeah, so that's actually new to me, but it's something that I've recently started using, and it's been super helpful. But so much of what we do in these kinds of roles is come in and assess how people are working, and then we're tasked to improve it in some way. And so that often requires, change in the way people are used to working, and that can be frustrating for us and them when it doesn't go as smoothly as we hoped. And I think in my whole career, I've kind of intuitively done change management, knowing that it's all about the people, that it's not about the process, and we have to bring them along in the change. But I never had a framework to use a reference until pretty recently. I was in an internal conference, and somebody from the change management team presented this process called ADKAR. And it's something that I've referenced back. So basically, each letter stands for something. A is for awareness, so helping people understand the need to change. D is for desire, so building momentum and getting people to understand or try to desire the change themselves and support that change. And then K is know how to change. So you're providing people with the information and the skills that they need to achieve the change, so that can be in trainings. Ability A is for ability, which is getting them to actually implement it themselves. And then R is reinforcement, so just sustaining the change over time. And as I've been implementing new processes, bringing the whole design team onto one system to track all of their work rather than them using 10 different tools. That was a big process that, beyond just creating this database and creating the tool itself, more of the work was really getting buy-in from everyone who is really set in their ways to make sure they understand why it's important. And I use this tool to just kind of remind myself and along the way.
Well, it's a great framework, and I know you'll talk a little bit more about it at the summit. Guneet, I don't know if you have the similar situation as Rachel, where you have a change management team to draw on for help. But I know that not everyone does, and I know that part of your approach is to differentiate quick wins from the bigger challenges. With or without the help of a change management expert or team, how do you do that?
Yeah, so we don't have a specific change management team per se, but the change management itself is ingrained in the principles of each of the team leads or the management. As the new managers come on board, I think that's part of their onboarding as well. So one of the key things which we do is to understand how do you keep the lights on if somebody's leaving or some people are kind of retreating. So one of the key things which we do is to understand what are the short-term wins we need to accomplish in a quarter versus the long-term wins we need to accomplish for that particular role or for each and every individual, which is kind of working on that aspect of it. Identifying that upfront gives visibility to the whole management in terms of how to keep the house running in case there is an attrition, in case there's some people are leaving the organization, because that's how we are prepared ahead of the time to kind of deal with it. Or also at least set the expectations with the partners beyond the research and the design organization. I think the key thing is having that visibility in terms of in the path each of the organization is taking on the charter or on the plan, which I was describing in earlier as we partner with cross-functional teams. That kind of becomes a single source of truth for us to kind of maintain that. So we use that more from a change management perspective, especially on the keeping the lights on.
Excellent. Put Crystal on the spot for a moment. I know that one of the real challenges with change management is just getting people involved, especially designers and researchers, to not lose sight of what's happening, that this is a long process and it's easy to kind of forget that it's even happening because you're inside it and it is slow. What have you found useful to kind of keep that front and center for the people you work with?
Sure. So before my current role, I worked at the U.S. Digital Service. So we were a team of people who are very fluent in the language of human-centered design and technology, trying to drive change inside the federal government, the largest bureaucracy ever. And it's really easy in a culture like that for people to feel like that there isn't momentum. But one of the key values of the U.S. Digital Service that we're the team that's brought there to try to create momentum. And so one of the tactics that we found helpful in order to try to get people more comfortable with changing the status quo is oftentimes there was a lot of fear that trying something new would introduce more risks. So for example, there was a large product that we were working on, and it was a huge team of people working on it, and we were part of the technical leadership team for this product. And a lot of the senior government stakeholders that we worked with were really were adverse to the idea of iterative releases. So, there was a date that we were legally required to release the product by, and they wanted to wait until that day to release it because they were afraid that, introducing something and rolling it out with a bug when you're working on government services could cost someone, access to really critical care and really critical services. But one thing that we did was that we realized that part of the reason why this idea that releasing iteratively was more risky in their mind was because of the motivations of the people going in. So a lot of the people that we were partnering with, they worked in government their whole career, their last 20, 30 years. And there isn't really an incentive to try to do things differently. There's really just fear of doing something wrong. But a lot of us, we were coming into this role as a term limited service. So a lot of people on our team, we would come in for 2 years and then oftentimes go into other civic tech organizations or go back into the private sector. So we had a lot more appetite for risk. And so one thing we did was we told our stakeholders, how about this? I'm proposing that we take this approach. If it succeeds, we will give you all of the credit. And if it fails, you can blame us. And that really, just framing the conversation that way and saying that over and over again to every person we worked with, whenever we want to try something new, let's go out and talk to people who use this government service, a radical idea, potentially risky in their mind. Just saying that we were willing to take the blame if something went wrong made people feel okay, I'd be willing to try something new. And then when we were able to convince someone to try something new, that helped our team feel like there was actually momentum in changing the culture of the organization and really managing that change throughout the entire government agency through all levels of bureaucracy.
Wow. Change management and government. And that's very impressive. Maybe we should have a whole conference just on that one of these days. But I want to hear from one more person on this third theme before we wrap it up, and that's you, Jose. Can we talk a little bit about other examples, maybe of the types of tactical successes you found useful to help people not lose sight of change management processes?
Yeah, I think not only for people to not lose sight, but also for myself and the design operations practice to maintain its credibility. One of the things that we have done is we have identified big ticket items, like, for example, processes that we need to change. But rather than tackle the process as a whole, we have begun to break it down into smaller pieces. So, for example, the definition of done, the combined backlogs between technology, product, and design. And if some of those pieces succeed, we're good. We can put it into practice. If it fails, it's only that small piece that fails. It's not the entire process change initiative that failed. So we're giving us the opportunity to experiment, iterate, demonstrate with smaller teams and a smaller control risk that we can actually push for that change to happen. And that's kind of the way, obviously at a totally different scale, not government or public service, but the way that we're trying to tackle change in a complex, large organization.
I wish we could keep going, but the good news is we are going to keep going at the DesignOps Summit. This panel with these 4 brilliant research ops and design ops leaders is going to take place on October 23rd. I'll be on stage doing my best to moderate, and people in the audience will certainly have an opportunity to ask questions and participate in this conversation. Again, we'll be doing it at the DesignOps Summit in October in New York. I want to thank our 4 participants, our panelists. They are Crystal Yan of Remitly, Guneet Singh of Docusign, Jose Coronado of JPMorgan Chase, and Rachel Posman of UberEats. You can find them all on LinkedIn. I've lost track of all their various Twitter handles, so you'll have to hunt a little harder to find them, but their bios are on the DesignOpsSummit.com site, and I hope you'll have an opportunity to meet them all in October in New York. Hey, thanks everyone. Great to have you join us today on the Rosenfeld Review.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen. And please check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.